Let's talk about the Junior Cert Science exam. First of all, my overall thoughts on the paper. I think it was definitely a lot more of a balanced paper this year. Last year's exam I thought was very heavy on earth and space and physics. Thankfully this year there was a bigger emphasis on biology and chemistry. I think there was also a bigger emphasis this year on applying your knowledge in unknown circumstances. There was some content being assessed like the systems, respiration, photosynthesis, a little bit of chemistry, and as mentioned in one of my Junior Cert Science videos, there was a big emphasis on interpreting data. Your graphing skills were definitely assessed in a few places. I think there was 2 or 3 graphs actually that you had to read. Without further ado, let's start looking through the paper. The first question. Why was there short questions about geography? Where on the course do we teach about ocean currents, volcanic eruptions, tectonic plates? Like, I don't know where this question came from, and that kind of really annoyed me when I first seen it. Question 2, your states of matter was nice and handy. So your solid, liquid and gas. These are all physical changes. Justify your answer. We haven't made any new products, so if you imagine this as water, it's still H2O regardless of the process. Question 3, graphing question was really handy. If you're good at reading graphs and understanding the relationship between time, heart rate, you were totally fine with that. I mentioned in a previous video, if I was to say the most important physics chapters, I would definitely say electricity, followed by forces, and then speed and acceleration. And we saw a lot of that in this paper. This force was lift, this was friction, and this was weight. Your calculation down the bottom, all you simply had to do was multiply your mass by your acceleration due to gravity to get your weight. Question 5, a really handy question on the atom, which you would have done probably like in first year. So looking at the first question, which had a negative charge, that's obviously our electron. The particle that has no charge, that's the neutron. Bohr's model of the atoms often refers as a planetary model, suggests a reason for this. You could say anything about the electrons orbiting around the nucleus, so that's similar to the planets orbiting around the sun. Part B's answer, if you're good at predicting ratios, you would have guessed the element was nitrogen. And then to find the chemical formula, it was NH3, and you can see that there by the image. 6, a very, very simple acid bases question. A lot of this you probably could have guessed. The lemon juice is acidic, water as we know is neutral, and bleach is slightly basic. For part B, which type of sting could the cream be used to treat? If it was acidic, because one of the ingredients is sodium bicarbonate, and they even told you in the question that that is basic. The system short question, the breathing system, because I know a lot of people don't like the circulatory system, and this was just a simple fill in the blanks, and they even gave you the words to use. And then moving on to section B, this is where we finally saw some electricity. Electricity tends to be kept for the longer questions in the paper, so we were expecting that there. The section here about chemistry, and it was about the marble chips and to do with surface area. So basically, the larger the surface area, the greater the increase in the rate of the reaction. Always ask about the variables in an experiment, your independent, dependent and your control. Independent variable, the thing you would have changed in that experiment was the size of the marble chips. For your dependent variable, what was affected? Well, the volume of gas produced per minute, in other words, the rate of the reaction. And then control, well, we would have kept the concentration of the hydrochloric acid the same. Then we had more graphs and more data that you had to deduce and make sense of. I actually kind of liked this question because it was more, I suppose, interdisciplinary science where it brought chemistry, physics, earth and space all into one. So I thought that was favourable for the students who really understood the different units in science. Then we had a nice and handy question here about respiration and photosynthesis, our biological processes that we study. The word biological, if you think of the word biology, it means these processes occur in living things. So photosynthesis happens in the chloroplast of plant cells. The mitochondria is the site for respiration, and we know respiration occurs in all living organisms. Gas said at the end, the gas that's made by plants is oxygen. Part of the question, you can see they asked you to plot your points on this graph paper provided. You had to do 2 separate lines because obviously you had flask A and flask B for separate results. Look, overall, I think it was a balanced, fair enough paper. It was definitely a nicer paper than last year's. I think students who were better at the graphing skills, biology and chemistry would have really enjoyed this paper.